Good afternoon. Welcome to today's partnership session. Our guest today is Tom Sturme from Nerium, and we'll discuss how to build resilience for your SaaS product and company. So we'll answer what are the most common cybersecurity attacks and how to prevent them. I'm Paulina, the Customer Experience Manager at Amsterdam Standard, and I want to thank you all for tuning in for this session. And welcome, Tom. I'm very glad to have you here today. And before we begin, can you give us a little personal intro and an intro to your experience in security?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I'm Tom Sturme. I work at Nerium. I'm responsible for the managed detection and response service of Nerium. So we are proactively protecting customers against attacks, cyber attacks. That's my personal interest as well, of course. I've done this for close to 8 years now, I guess. Previous to Nerium, I was working at another large enterprise where I was responsible for the security operations center and the incident response team. So we protected a company with 60,000 endpoints against cyber attacks, and we did some cool incident response engagements where the company was hacked, and we needed to find the adversaries. So that is also my personal interest. So I'm happy to do this work.
Awesome, thank you. So let's jump right into our topic. So can you please give us, tell us what are the most common high-level cyber risks for organizations if companies don't take security measures?
Right. So let me go to the next slide then for my presentation. This is a slide I usually use for these type of questions. This is depicted how a company is set up in terms of its difficulties in technology, but also in business operations. So on the left side, you see the technology side of things. Once you have a lot of technology and a large technology stack in your company, there are bound to be some configuration faults and vulnerabilities that pop up now and then. But also the complexity of on-prem and cloud and hybrid is more and more becoming a factor in cybersecurity. And on the right side, you see the business operations. So more and more responsibilities are being put at the board level, board and management level, and you see that in a lot of law and regulation. Take, for example, the NIS2, it's a European regulation for governments, where they put the board in the responsible seat of cyber incidents if something would have happened. So the business operation is also very important in a company in terms of cybersecurity. They need to set the strategy and the priority to mitigate cyber risks. So if you take those two worlds together, there are like 4 most common cyber risks that a company is facing today. It's business continuity. So think of ransomware, right? You want to keep producing your products, keep producing your services. Reputational damage. If some information gets leaked to the press or to the internet, that's always bad for your reputation. Intellectual property. So a lot of companies, I can imagine the audience of this will have intellectual property, source code, that kind of stuff. You don't want to have that available for your competitors. And internal threats. That's something we see more and more, where employees are willingly or unwillingly taking information when they leave the company, for example, or when they think, okay, I created it, so it's mine, but it isn't actually. So that's also something we hear a lot nowadays.
Yeah, definitely. And probably this is also a result of just not knowing how this works, right? So
Sure.
maybe you can give us examples how those attacks can occur.
Right. So let me talk about the most common threats we see currently today, and the typical way of how an adversary gains access to a company, to a network. So on the left side of the slide, you see three types of attacks or threats, you can say, that I've seen the most in my career, especially lately. So the first one is business email compromise, where an adversary gets a hold of an email account of a company, and just an email account. These are pretty automated attacks where a phishing email is sent, and the victim puts in the credentials and the 2FA, and then the session is stolen. And with the access to the inbox, they usually either send out new phishing via that email address, so it seems legitimate, or they like alter a bill. What's the correct word for it? They alter some financial information so that payments are going to their bank account rather than the actual client's bank account. That's also called CEO fraud. That's a typical attack that we see more and more the last few years, and especially because it's simple to execute, relatively simple to execute, and there's a lot of automation going on. Yeah, the second one is ransomware. I think everybody's familiar with ransomware. Ransomware groups just try to get entrance everywhere they can, and then once they have entrance in a company, then they figure out, okay, which company is it, and is it worthwhile to proceed with this attack? So if you are more protected than your neighbors, then you're already good, right? Because then they won't hit you, and they will hit the next one, the next guy in the row. With ransomware, backups are very important because if you are encrypted, it's good to have backups that you can restore, but also that you can restore fast. And that's the thing that we usually see, that people think, okay, we have good backups, and then they are ransomed and they want to try to get back the backups, but it takes like a month to restore the backups, which is not feasible. Ransomware groups usually ask 10% of their gross revenue. That's usually the ransom they ask. That is negotiable. The experience I have with negotiating with ransomware groups is that usually you'll get to 50% to 80% discount. But it also depends on your backups again, because if you have good backups that you can restore within 10 days, then you have some leverage in the negotiations. The last attack that we see are advanced persistent threats. Those are the more stealthy groups. Those are also the nation state sponsored, and they are out to steal information. They are usually longer in a network of an organization than the ransomware groups, and their purpose is not to be detected, and they choose their victims very carefully. So these three common threats we see the most, and like 90% of them, they start with either, on the right side of the slide, either phishing or internet connected systems. So if I take the phishing one, is my mouse, you can see my mouse, right, Paulina?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so oh shoot. So a bad guy, this is a picture of a bad guy. So a bad guy tries to get into a network of a company. What they do is they send a phishing email. A person opens it. The attacker gets a foothold on the laptop where the person opens it. What they usually do is they look around where they are, which company they are, and they try to gain privileges. So they look around in a network to see if there is an account that has high privileges. They take over that account, and then they execute on their objectives. And this is a crown for like crown jewels. For example, they steal information, they encrypt information, or they alter information. And that's very simplistic view of how such an attack works. But the second one that we see like a lot is internet connected systems or services, I must say. So the bad guy connects to a service. That can be a login portal, it can be an email account, but can also be like a SaaS service that you're delivering for a customer, right? So if a user doesn't have 2FA and has a weak password, the adversary can guess the password, but also if the password is already leaked in another data leak, the adversary can gain that password. But also if there's a vulnerability out, a new vulnerability that can be exploited. Those are the ways that an adversary can get into the application itself. And then from the application, the adversary tries to get on the server itself. So break out of the application and get onto on the operating system. And there, from there, it's the same as the phishing email, to be honest. They just look around where they are and try to get a hold of an account that has high privileges, and then execute on their objectives, like steal data, encrypt data, alter data, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. So can you give us quick measures, because we can't really go into that much detail, for those 3 types of attacks? Or in general?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you some measures for these two common attack vectors, so the phishing and the internet-connected systems, but also talk about more general improvements and ways to get your cyber resilience to a good level. So for phishing, I think it's already well known, but I'll repeat some of them. The first thing we usually do is like review your spam filters. Most of the companies are using Microsoft as an email provider, and Microsoft doesn't, per default, not the strictest policies are set by Microsoft. There is a nice Microsoft article on the internet, you can just Google for it, would give you the best practice for spam filters. We always advise our customers to follow those, because that can already prevent a lot. The next one is phishing simulations. So train your employees, send out phishing for yourself, see how many people click it. Implement two-factor authentication, also for your email environment, very important. But also, this is more a technical one, implement SPF and DKIM. Those are settings in your email environment that you can set that will verify a sender.
And this is something that all employees should do.
No, this is a one-time effort by your IT department, that the SPF and the DKIM, same as the right? Cloud environment. So if you have an on-prem email environment, I would really strongly suggest to migrate it to cloud, so you won't have the burden anymore for keeping up with patches, that kind of stuff. We see a lot of 0 days for Exchange servers coming out, and those servers are always connected to the internet, so that saves you a lot of hassle. And endpoint detection and response. That's a product that you can implement on your laptops that would detect malicious activity. Some measures for internet-connected services. Patching your system is very, very, very important. Every time we see a new 0 day coming out, like days after, you see a lot of companies being hit with ransomware because they are not quick enough in patching. And the adversaries just automate this, right? So if there's a new vulnerability out for Citrix or for Exchange or whatever, the adversaries just take that vulnerability and then script it and scan the internet, and then wherever it hits, then they go further. Limit your services that are connected to the internet. So if the service doesn't need to be connected to the internet, don't connect it. That limits your digital footprint. That also limits the attacker the possibility to gain access. Also here, implement two-factor authentication, and also here deploy an EDR, so an endpoint detection and response tool, which will alert you on if there's anything malicious going on the system itself. So these are tailored to the two attack factors that I just explained, but these are the more general ones. Security hygiene, it all begins with security hygiene. If your hygiene is not on par, then the rest of the controls don't make that much sense. And there is a lot of things you can mention here in the security hygiene, but it's also very good. You can also Google it very easily. But the most important ones I've written down, to my experience at least, is to have two-factor authentication on all things that are connected to the internet. to patch. I cannot repeat it enough. It's very important to patch your vulnerabilities. Protect your sensitive accounts. So that's your admin accounts for applications, but also your domain administrator accounts or exchange administrator accounts. Those are the accounts that adversaries like 9 out of 10 times go after. So if you protect those and also monitor on those, that's very good. And segment your network. So if they have access to an application, prevent them from hopping over to another segment where your users are, or where your data is stored, or where your users are working. So that's more enough. Yeah.
So this is like very basis of.
Yeah. It is. It's basic, but it's also some of them are resource intensive, right? Because segmenting your network, if you have a really big network and it's all flat, then it takes some time to make segments of it. But 2FA, I would say, is fairly easy to implement. Also, vulnerability scanning and patching it's some work, but it's not the end of the world, and it makes a huge difference.
Have you seen many clients who didn't have that
Sure.
basic staging?
Yeah. And those are the clients that don't come to us for the proactive services, they come for the reactive services. So they're already hit by the ransomware, right? Especially, we've seen a lot with our clients, especially if companies have a lot of services open to the internet without 2FA. Those are bound to be hacked at some point.
Okay.
So that's the hygiene. You need to fix the hygiene before you can get some decent proactive services. And proactive services, we have two categories, or like my experience, there are two categories. So pen testing. So let yourself be hacked. Know your vulnerabilities. Know the possible ways of how you can be hacked by an adversary and fix them. But also let yourself be monitored. And do that 24/7, either yourself or get a security partner that helps you with it, and do it 24/7. Because we also see some customers say, oh no, 8x5 is fine, so only work days and only during business hours. But you see a lot of malicious activity in the weekends and on Friday afternoon. That's usually when they hit. So that's on the proactive side. On the reactive side, it's always good to be prepared for an incident, because even if you think you are secured enough, you're never 100% secured for a cyber incident. And if something happens, then it's always good to have a crisis plan ready, so you know what you need to do and what you can do. But also you have a security partner on hand that can help you during such a crisis situation.
So security hygiene, you said it's fairly easy. So is it something like the company can set up themselves with their IT department?
Yeah. Together with the IT partner, these are not new concepts, right? So these are definitely things that the company can do with the help of the IT partner. Yes.
So, but the proactive services, on the other hand, probably you need someone.
That's more specialized work. So letting yourself be hacked, that's you need a person that knows how to hack a company, and not all IT providers know how to do that. But also letting yourself be monitored. So IT companies can also monitor your environment, but that's usually on performance and bottlenecks and that kind of stuff. If a security partner like Nerium monitors an environment, that's really tailored to techniques and procedures that an adversary would do within a network. So we're really monitoring the network on the malicious behavior, but also reacting to that malicious behavior if we see it.
Okay. And how often would you suggest to have those services and tests performed?
Yeah, so a pen test, I would say once a year is good. It's good enough, and being monitored, it's just 24/7. So either do it yourself or get a security partner that is 24/7 monitoring your environment.
And reactive services, I'm curious about the crisis plan, because it does sound like something nice to have. at all times. Can you give like very, very basic info,
Sure.
how that looks like, how to set it up?
Yeah, so a lot of times when we help a customer recover from, for example, a ransomware incident, the first hours are pretty critical, and they usually figure out on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday night or something, because then the adversaries deploy the ransomware, and then they are known. Then the company knows they are there. So usually that's on a time frame where everybody's either asleep or not working. So a crisis plan is really critical in those moments, because there are a couple of default things you need to document in a crisis plan. Like, if such an incident would occur, who is the crisis team? Who in the company should be aware of this? Who in the company should be can make decisions like cutting the internet or disabling all accounts, that kind of stuff. Do we have the phone numbers of those people? If those people are all on holiday, who is the backup of those people, right? What's the hotline of the IT provider? Do we have a war room? Is there a way of communication if our email is out? All those type of things that you would need to have during the first period of the crisis, that you need to document, but also test. So we also see companies that have a perfect crisis plan documented somewhere on SharePoint, and then they got ransomed, and then the crisis plan is also encrypted, so they cannot access the crisis plan. But even if they can, they don't know where it is, or there are some little things that doesn't make sense. So we also really advise to test it once you have it in place. And there the security provider can help in setting it up, but also in testing it. Yeah.
Okay, so this is something you can do once for like longer term?
Yeah, sure. So we usually help customers with setting up a crisis plan. That's a template, and if it's not a big of a company, that's not a lot of work. And then we do what we call tabletops. Then we sit in one room, get all the people involved, and then mimic a ransomware scenario. So we say, okay, and now all the screens are on black. What are you going to do? Where is the crisis plan? Who are you going to call? Right? And then you can really test your plan, and then there will always be little things that you haven't thought of that are realized during such a scenario, which are really helpful when there's a real incident.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome, thank you. So I think this concludes the types of attacks, the most common ones that you've seen throughout your career, and the very basic checklist of what you can do first to prevent those, because prevention probably is the best first thing you can do.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom, so much for this. And we'll include contact info to Tom in case you are in the crisis mode and you need and you need support, then call Tom. Otherwise, I hope this is helpful for anyone who's watching. And thank you.
All right, thanks.
See ya.